At the end of the 2nd century, China was in trouble. The empire, long united, had divided. Why? It was said to be inevitable. Why inevitable? Few ever asked, and fewer still knew the answer. For years, the capital had been held in a dream, screened from the unrivaled empire it commanded. The eunuchs who controlled the imperial court kept the depravity of the world from the emperor, and he in turn praised them for their rule over a world that so rarely produced ills. Outside the capital, the bodies of the people lay unburied in the fields. Taxes could not be lowered when harvests failed. Doctors could not be recruited to tend to epidemics. Corrupt officials and soldiers could not be dashed against the law and destroyed. None of this could happen, for the emperor knew not of it. That is, until the smoke trailing up into the sky was visible even from the quiet gardens of the imperial palace. In the year 184, the realm was taken from the emperor by its own people. A revolution surged, with millions of hungry, leaderless people turning to the great preacher of peace, Zhang Jue, and his so-called Yellow Turban Army. Counties, commanderies and provinces closed their doors on the Han Empire. The imperial house was about to be destroyed and replaced with something unthinkable to those that hung their own dynasties from its rafters. Desperate, the eunuchs had the emperor authorize the landowners, officials, and anyone with a mote of loyalty in their hearts to take up arms and restore imperial law to the lost territories. This was a chance for any man of ambition to grant themselves rank and render service such that the rank would one day be even further elevated by the emperor himself. These men, these warlords, emerged from gated mansions, from city offices and from mountain schools, and became so fierce that the revolution of millions was cowed and faded away. They told themselves that the Yellow Turbans were rebels, and were taking the right to peaceful lives away from the people. Sometimes this was even true. One of them believed it more strongly than any other, a mat weaver from a small northern town, a man named Liu Bei. Liu was the family name of the ruling Han dynasty, and since he was a child, Liu Bei had told anyone who would listen that he was a relative of the sitting emperor. It had stuck, and when he strode from his weaving shed at 23 years of age, the county captain he volunteered himself to was astonished by the man's regal aura. Liu Bei, a fatherless commoner living coin to coin, was granted money, soldiers, and mandate to lead as his apparently noble blood saw fit. Of the men he was assigned, the two mightiest, Zhang Fei and Guan Yu, he took as bodyguards and captains, and together they fought the rebels across the country for many years, becoming sworn brothers in the service of the imperial dynasty. For Liu Bei, his lifelong dream of playing a part in the grand matters of the empire was coming true. He pursued the destruction of the rebels with unmatched relish and energy, claiming heads by the thousands. His fury for the rebels equaled the extent of his kindness and gratitude to the loyal, peace-loving people of his empire. For his achievements, Liu Bei was granted a petty government office, a promotion beyond the dreams of a mouthy rural mat weaver. Others had far greater ambitions. In scholarly circles, it was well known that the strange fictions of the eunuchs were behind the empire's close call. Thus, just as it had been virtuous to slay the people beneath the yellow banners, it would be more virtuous still to seize power from those scheming courtiers. Many tried in many ways over many years, and by the end of the jostling, the eunuchs were all dead, and their offices and powers had been all taken up by a man from Xiliang with 200,000 troops at his side, Dong Zhuo. Dong Zhuo had so much power that he was the emperor in all but name, and his rule over the capital was even more despotic and self-serving than that of the eunuchs. Liu Bei felt the pressure himself when he was banished from his post as a magistrate by imperial decree. The emperor, or someone writing his decrees, revoked all offices granted in the wake of the rebellion, for the warlords of the land had gotten far too agitated by the power it gave them. These warlords were less than happy and marched to the capital at Luoyang to take revenge. Dongzhuo fled, but callously razed the city so that none could have it in his stead. He smuggled the young emperor beyond the western mountain passes towards his own stomping ground of Xiliang, out of reach for now. Liu Bei was not among the warlords at Luoyang. He instead packed up his possessions and wandered the roads of the central plains with Zhang Fei, Guan Yu, and a small retinue of soldiers left over from his years campaigning for the empire. Wherever he went, he took it upon himself to root out banditry, right wrongs, and preach the ethics of kindness to the people, never taking a bribe and never letting even a trifling concern go unattended. This was most unusual, and for his down-to-earth consideration, Liu Bei became a popular hero of the age. By the year 190, he was marching his army into the mountains of Dong Commandery in the rich region of Yanzhou. Here, the local villagers reported Yellow Turban sympathizers had turned to banditry, which was in truth where most of the outlaw revolutionaries had ended up across the country. It was then that he heard rumors of Luoyang's destruction and the abduction of the emperor, his own kin, if you'll consider a shared ancestor some 350 years prior to be a bond worthy of calling kinship. "There is not room under heaven for both I and the traitor Dongzhuo," Liu Bei declared, throwing his cup of wine to the ground and storming out of his tent. "They are only rumors, elder brother," Guan Yu assured him as he caught up to his master. "Rumors that ripple from all directions, like Earth itself wishes we hear them. It is true." "I told you this would happen," Zhang Fei said as he joined them. "We should have gone with that Yuan Shao, no matter how stuck up he was. If we'd been there, we'd be drinking with the emperor in Luoyang right now." "Be calm, younger brother," Guan Yu said. "It was the likes of Yuan Shao who installed Dongzhuo in the first place. It would be disrespectful for our lord to march with him. Do not suggest this again." "So we're not going to go rescue the emperor even now?" Zhang Fei asked in astonishment. "We have already pledged ourselves to the townsfolk here," Liu Bei said. "Younger brothers, please be patient. The liberation of the Han encompasses all its people. Our work here furthers our final goal. Indeed, that goal is impossible without this, which is why only we can restore this empire to order." "If you say it, it must be true, brother," Zhang Fei conceded, heading back inside. "Should I send out scouts to seek more information?" Guan Yu asked. "No, get some rest, and make sure brother Zhang controls himself. We will challenge for battle in the morning." The Liu army of some 1,700 men formed up at the mouth of the valley that led to the Yellow Turban camp. All day they waited, until finally at sundown their foes emerged. They numbered only half Liu's force, and many were dirtied from a day's labour in the mines and fields. For weapons, most bore rakes or short bows strung only in recent days. At their head was Zhao Bo, his armour wrapped in black to mourn the death of the General of Heaven, Zhang Jue, the rebellion's old figurehead. "Beneath the yellow heaven, who dares bear arms against the people?" Zhao Bo called out. Liu Bei bid no reply be given. Zhao Bo raised a spear and reared his horse. "If you have no last words, then come receive your punishment." "Who is this bandit to dare request combat?" Liu Bei sneered, but already Zhang Fei had broken ranks and was rushing out. "Insolent rebel! Making us wait all day? Face me!" the tiger-like warrior shouted. He met Zhao Bo in the open field between the armies, and their spears clashed and twanged in a rapid exchange of blows. The Yellow Turbans were rushing to help, but a volley of arrows from Liu Bei's battle line sent them tumbling to the ground. Two more volleys laid the unarmoured front ranks to waste, and then before them they saw Zhao Bo's head rise up on the end of Zhang Fei's huge serpent blade spear. Seeing this also, Liu Bei waved his swords, and the government troops charged with a cry that echoed down the valley. The Yellow Turbans threw down what meagre arms they had and fled, but the walls of the valley kept them in Liu Bei's path. Many stopped to pray for forgiveness, and those not trampled by the horses in the enthusiasm of the chase were tied up and marched behind the army the next day as they travelled to the Turban stronghold beyond the valley's wide eastern mouth. That evening, Liu Bei, Zhang Fei and Guan Yu sat in a deceased nobleman's manor outside the pacified fort. The one they call the Wielder of the Heavenly Way is marching along the river. He has gathered many outlaws into his band, they say. The people of Taishan are in grave danger, Liu Bei reported. He disrespects heaven with such a ludicrous title, Guan Yu said, clutching his green dragon saber across his lap. Brother, allow me to rid the Empire of this menace tonight. If you're willing to go, then heaven and earth alike would be forever in your debt, brother, Liu Bei said with a bowing salute. In that case, Zhang Fei said, suddenly standing, I'll go bring you the head of the traitor Dong Zhuo as well. Then we can feast in peace. Wait, brother. The great heroes of the land have already tried and failed to defeat him, and Luoyang's people were made slaves to the tyrant because of it. Besides, we three pledged to live as one that day in the Peach Garden. You'll let Brother Guan go out, but not me, Zhang Fei raged. I can bear to be apart from Brother Guan for a day. But Chang'an is truly far. How many seasons would I be made to wait without you, brother? You cannot possibly ask so much of me, Liu Bei said, bowing to Zhang Fei. Zhang Fei broke out in laughter, resumed his seat, and reached for the wine bowl. The matter of Dong Zhuo was dropped, but in the subsequent drinking, they agreed that all three of them should take their men to challenge the self-proclaimed wielder of the Heavenly Way. They left a garrison of troops at the nearby fortress to await the arrival of the inspector of Yan province, who would decide what fate should meet the pacified lands. They were in for a long wait. In the meantime, Liu Bei took his entourage north. They moved slowly, travelling off the main road to visit the villages and temples of the region. However, the people always scattered into the hills to hide upon seeing military banners approach. The rule of the tyrant is like a sickness in the hearts of the people, Liu Bei commented. They cannot know who is friend or foe. That such a time as this came about while I walked the earth is a curse I will not ignore. After 2 weeks, they came upon the market town of Taishan. In front of it, someone had erected a large black and gold banner that read, Huang Xiao, wielder of the Heavenly Way, will heal all who approach in good faith, and banish all who approach in bad faith. So this is the depth the rebels have stooped to now, Zhang Fei laughed. They field not armies, but bed covers. The brothers encamped just a mile from the town, then gathered their troops even closer on the following dreary morning. Ahead of them, more banners of black, blue and yellow lined the outskirts, although there was not so much as a ditch prepared in its defence. Bells rang out in a strange pattern from the low mist covering the inner streets. They've already taken hold of the town, Liu Bei lamented. We have no choice but to restore order by force. He sent his brothers to lead one half of the army towards the magistrate's office in the southern district, while he commanded the rest himself. He pointed out at the suburbs ahead of him and said to his men, The Emperor weeps for his people, lost in the clutches of the lying sages. The Son of Heaven's tears bring we, his servants, the greatest shame. Redeem yourselves now by bringing me the head of the traitor Huang. With a cry, Liu Bei's volunteer troops brandished their spears in both hands and rushed forwards. At the same moment, the mist from the town suddenly rose into the sky like a serpent withdrawing its tongue. Heaven is with us! Liu Bei cheered, waving more men into the assault. Those already charging forwards were pelted with arrows and bolts from watchtowers, and men fell as they drew closer to the line of turban banners. They heard thunder behind them and hastily parted as Liu Bei's horsemen galloped up with heaven's blessing to storm the town. They cleared the lines of banners and found crowds of men clad in black behind them, wielding swords, spears and staffs. The horses flattened those towards the front, but their momentum was stolen away and they became embroiled in a mess of desperate fighting. Liu Bei's footmen climbed over the fallen horses to join the battle. Liu Bei observed the chaos from behind, unsure what to make of it. until suddenly a single horseman burst from the fight and made a beeline right for him. This was Guan Hai, one of Huang Shao's lieutenants. So fierce and sudden was his charge that Liu Bei was thrown from his horse as he tried to avoid Guan Hai's outstretched spear. Guan Hai jumped down and came at Liu Bei again, but the imperial kinsman was up on his feet already, with a gold-hilted broadsword in each hand. "I heard you were a man who understood the plight of the people," Guan Hai taunted as they fought. "That plight is your doing, rebel. You upset heaven with your unfilial and selfish behavior. Surrender! Great Teacher Huang was right about you," was Guan's reply, and the fight went on. However, this Guan Hai was a mere farmhand. He had seen many battles, but fought in few. Liu Bei parried his spear with one hand and cut him across the arm with the other. The spear was dropped, and Guan Hai was left staring at the gleaming midnight blade pointed at his neck. "Kill me, Lord Liu Bei. Blessed to be a timeless spirit, I will find a cure for your madness. I'm sure of it." Liu Bei wasn't sure what Guan Hai meant, but the confusion cooled his temper. He lowered his sword. "Your loyalty is strong, but misplaced," Liu Bei lectured. "You are right of heart, but have been deceived. Do you see that?" Guan Hai gave no reply. "Go. Study the proper relation of ruler and subject, heaven and earth. You have a good man in you." Guan Hai was less confused and more astonished that Liu Bei dared speak of such things with the slaughter of Taishan's people raging loudly behind him. Still, with little apparent merit in dying by this lord's hands, he took his leave while it was still being offered. In the southern district of the town, the Yellow Turban troops responded to the alarm of the watchman and gathered to defend against a new attack. Strangely, they saw only a single man riding towards them. The man's long black beard swayed as his horse soared across the dewy grass, and his long blade shone dimly beneath the haze-bound sun. He showed no signs of slowing down as he approached the wall of shields before him, and to the astonishment of all who witnessed it, he simply bashed them aside like reeds and carried on into the town. The street to the magistrate's office was awash with these black-clad warriors, blocking Guan Yu's path. His horse whinnied, the green dragon saber arced, and the yellow turbans collapsed upon each other in their panic to escape. Weapons and shields flipped and span into the air, sometimes with limbs still clutching them. Guan Yu said nothing and heard no pleas for mercy in turn. Zhang Fei now arrived with additional horsemen, and together they cleaved their way down the tightly packed street. Their swords cut through the brooms the people held up in their defence, and the spears made short work of whatever scraps of armour they had hung over their bodies. The song of bells carried on, growing quieter. Religious chants were heard here and there, but the din of fighting masked it. Rising above the melee on his horse, Guan Yu saw a group of men in monk's clothing approach the battle. They surveyed the scene aghast for a few moments, then one of them rode out with sword in hand and carved a path through the melee. "You! Are you the one who styles himself wielder of the heavenly way?" Guan Yu called out. The rider came over to him and carefully cleaned his sword as he replied, "Heaven makes its will for the people known through me. Even the deepest cut from this blade can be healed by my hands. Yet in turn the merest graze will end the life of the impure." "You have brought death and desolation to these lands, rebel. Prepare to meet your end, in the name of the Han," Guan Yu growled, and a fight commenced. "You defend the Han like a dog guarding its rotting master," Huang Shao said after their initial bouts provided no victor. "I expunge the rot like a surgeon and restore the nation to life," Guan Yu retorted. "An easy thing to say. Don't you see, Lord, that the Han that brought us to these calamitous times is the very same Han you champion?" "Nonsense! It was the likes of you who brought the calamity, and now I will end it," Guan Yu shouted. "Carry on as you will, and perhaps if you live to be 5,000 years old, you'll see just how far off the end of your mission is." With this cryptic remark, Huang Shao rode away and signalled to someone in a nearby tower. Flags were waved, The bell song altered, and suddenly the turbans were fleeing the town in defeat all around. Liu Bei met up with Guan Yu and Zhang Fei shortly after, and they gathered the troops to celebrate their victory. Liu Bei ordered that a public feast be held to mark the liberation of Taishan from the bandits. However, this proved impossible. The houses and businesses of the town were empty. Every one of Taishan's 400 families had fled alongside Huang Shao. To enslave a whole town. No better than the traitor Dong, Zhang Fei commented. Liu Bei began to arrange for people to be brought in from the nearby counties and farms to repopulate the town, many of whom he offered positions in his army as foot soldiers. With the guarantee of food that came with it, and Liu Bei's local reputation as a conscientious man, he found his ranks swelling over the next few weeks. With no word of Huang Shao coming in, and no developments from the capital, Liu Bei was almost despairing over his lack of ability to either save the people or the emperor. His floundering finally ended when a messenger arrived in Taishan, bearing word from a high official of the Han, word that spoke of an ambitious and devious opportunity to serve the beleaguered emperor. What did the message say? Read on. That cannot be. Why would Minister Wang kowtow to the traitor like that? Liu Bei asked, looking up from the letter in his hand. Because he is a traitor himself, I'll wager, Zhang Fei answered. Can we be certain of Lord Tao Chan's purpose here? Guan Yu added. He is asking us to aid him against a minister of the Han. What if his true intention was to test our own loyalty, in order to give Minister Wang an excuse to confiscate the lands under your protection, brother? Lord Tao would never treat with the tyrant. But I thought the same of Minister Wang as well. There should still be no doubt on our part. If they wish to test who our loyalty truly lies with, then let them find out the answer. With this, Liu Bei organized his army for a march east. There, in Langye Commandery, was this Minister Wang who the message had spoke of. Tao Chen, the elderly governor of Shu province to the south, claimed that Wang was co-opting tax revenues to send to Dongzhuo's Mei Pleasure Palace outside Chang'an. Needless to say, a loyal Han official would rather die than see the people's labor support the debauchery of the tyrant. In death, surely the problem would be solved. On the road to Langye, Liu Bei was visited by Mi Zhu, one of Tao Chen's advisors. Can what Lord Tao says about Minister Wang really be true? Liu Bei asked him. It is quite true, and there is more. In the capital, it is said that Minister Wang sent his only daughter into Dongzhuo's palace, where she resides as the chief among his concubines, Mi Zhu said. The despicable rat, Liu Bei exclaimed. He shows no loyalty to his emperor, and now he makes bribes of his own family. The scoundrel! We can allow his head to remain attached to his body no less than we can allow Emperor Shan to live in peril. We must double our pace. Mi Zhu accompanied Liu Bei to the city of Langye, where walls lined with flags and archers ended their path. The banner of Minister of the Interior Wang Yun was hung from the west gate. Minister Wang, we demand audience in the name of the Imperial House, Guan Yu boomed. Liu Bei and Zhang Fei waited beside him, but no answer came from the gatehouse above. Who will summon Minister Wang for his beating? Zhang Fei shouted, but Liu Bei checked him and called out, I, Liu Bei of Pingyuan, kinsman of the Son of Heaven, am here to pay my respects to His Excellency Minister Wang. Please tell him I have arrived. There seemed to be some deliberation going on between some men in plumed helmets up on the wall, and then finally a response was made. Minister Wang welcomes you and presents you with this gift, a voice shouted. Then the archers drew and released a barrage of arrows. Guan Yu and Zhang Fei swept them away with a flourish of their weapons, then quickly led their elder brother out of range. There is no doubt left, brother, Guan Yu said. We must enter the city and slay the collaborator in full view of heaven. Only then can the people understand your loyalty. Minister Wang was appointed by Emperor Shan himself before the tyrant rose. How could he be so frivolous? Liu Bei said. Don't think about it, Zhang Fei said. He threw away any worth he had just to keep his life, I bet. Let's be rid of him quickly. and then take out his master in Chang'an." The Liu army settled down outside Langye, setting the city to siege. A few days later, they were visited by a large group of peasants from the surrounding countryside. They eagerly, almost desperately, offered up food and clothes for the soldiers, filling Liu Bei with pride. He thanked them heartily, happy that the people had not followed Wang Yun's example, and happy that his men now had plenty of supplies for the onset of winter. The peasants found peace in the belief that those who survived to see spring would be left alone by the invading troops. Next, Liu's camp was visited by another group of peasants, led by a familiar face, a man named Jian Yong, one of Liu Bei's attendants. He had been left to oversee the repopulation of Taishan, but now he and Taishan's new residents were standing out in the stark late autumn fields surrounding Langye. Jian Yong explained that he had abandoned the town when Huang Shao's top general Pei Yuanshao brought an army to demand their surrender. Liu Bei praised Jian Yong for his decisive action, but there was not enough food in the camp to keep them until the business at Langye concluded. Liu Bei thought of sending them with Mi Ju to beg Tao Chen for refuge, but then, just hours behind Jian Yong, a single wanderer came into camp with an even better solution. Liu Bei was called out of his tent by the guards, who claimed that a monk was insisting on seeing him. The monk pulled off his hat, and Guan Yu recognized him at once. "It's the traitor Huang!" he shouted, readying his blade. Liu Bei waved him back. "What do you want, rebel?" Liu Bei asked. "I come to you on behalf of heaven and the people," Huang Shao said. "I was told that your captain had refused the assistance of Pei Yuanshao at Taishan and stole away the people there. Here I see that this was no lie. Why do you insist the people suffer at your behest, O Lord? Jian Yong knew what you had in store for them. Your false prayers and rebellious intent are widely known. Why pretend I would think otherwise, rebel?" Liu Bei replied. "If even you cannot correctly assess my intent, why would a mere follower have better fortune? If you have nothing to say, traitor, then let us be done." "I have something to say, something to ask. Let the people go. They are not yours to ferry about as cattle." "You've got some nerve, rebel!" Zhang Fei jumped in. "You enslaved Taishan before our very eyes." "Enslaved? They ran for their life, and I obliged them. Whereas afterwards, Taishan's people were force-marched out at the fall of winter by your elder brother here. Who is the slaver?" "You will not have them back. Now go," Liu Bei insisted. "I will bargain for their lives," Huang Shao said, falling to his knees. "Everyone will have their homes and guarantee that I will leave them to be your playthings in all other respects. Just let them have their homes, their farms." As he pleaded, Huang Shao pricked the palm of his hand with a pin several times, and blood began to leak out. Liu Bei bent down and stopped him, then picked him up. "Please stop. Are you promising to end your rebellion? Will you throw down your arms? I cannot do any different to what heaven wills. But I see now that to deal with one such as you means to endanger the people. So I will let you be, for their sakes." After further negotiation, an agreement was made. Huang Shao left with Jian Yong and the refugees, returning west. "Why didn't you kill him, elder brother?" Zhang Fei asked. "Because then no rebel would ever come to me and beg for peace again," Liu Bei said. "Still, he's gonna cause trouble, no doubt. Why trust him?" "I do not trust him, only his twisted morality. He wants my people for himself. Knowing that, I can sleep safely knowing he will not harm what he covets. He knows what I will do to his cultists if he does." Zhang Fei didn't buy Liu Bei's reasoning, but ceased his complaints all the same. The snows of winter came, and beneath them the earth resonated with the thudding of picks. Liu Bei's men had tunneled into Langye and dug out a large pit beneath the city wall, supported by timbers. On their lord's order, they used ropes to pull the timbers from their place. The weight of the stones above crumpled the earth, and the wall subsided down to a mere foot in height. Delighted, Liu Bei ordered the city be stormed at once. His men traipsed through the snow towards the breach, seeing Minister Wang's troops place their banners in the ground beyond it. Arrows flew from the city towards Liu's men, but in the 2 months waiting for this attack, many had fashioned long shields. The arrows thwacked into the wood like hailstones as the soldiers stamped closer to the wall. Arrows soared in the other direction also, scattering the men who had bravely stood atop the fallen wall. Seeing this, Guan Yu hoisted his weapon and rode out, leaping over the rubble and into the city. There he ran headlong into a squadron of cavalry who he began to kill without question. Behind him, Liu Bei's army crossed into the city also. However, it seems that crafty Minister Wang had kept his troops hidden in the shadow of the wall, as breaches that were once clear now crawled with troops, adorned with Imperial House Liu banners and government armour. Liu Bei gritted his teeth and ordered his men on through. The Han soldiers, Minister Wang's that is, were too few to resist the weight of the attack, and too outmatched to stop Guan Yu or Zhang Fei carving paths through their lines. Soon the defenders were surrounded and fled alongside groups of partially armed civilians guarding their homes. Liu Bei's men pursued furiously, killing those out in the streets, and when people barricaded themselves in buildings, fires were started. The northwestern district of the city was ablaze by the time the army reorganized for a concerted assault on the administrative compound. Guan Yu and Zhang Fei took the lead, cutting deep into the groups of archers guarding the entrance. Their troops rushed to keep up, and while they suffered greatly with the enemy all around them, the action caused enough chaos that Minister Wang's men began to despair and surrender. As Liu Bei oversaw the disarming of these troops, a man appeared from over the wall of the administrative compound beside him. It was none other than Wang Yun. "Wang Yun! The Emperor knows of your deceit and has sent me to punish you," Liu Bei said, grabbing his swords and lashing out. "Wait, Lord Liu Bei, you are mistaken," Wang Yun pleaded, staggering back as Liu's blows clanked against his sword. "Are you not the traitor Wang Yun, Minister of the Interior, would-be son-in-law of the tyrant Dongzhuo? I was working to bring the tyrant down, but he suspected something and sent me here. I have only just escaped the custody of his men in this chaos. You must call off your troops at once," the minister begged. "Nonsense. I heard you gave your own daughter to the traitor, and you sent him money and men on his every whim. What manner of behaviour could ever be so ruinous for the Empire? Wait, Lord Liu Bei. That I gave my darling daughter Diao Chan to the tyrant is the price of my scheme. She and I together have pledged to destroy him, but he must not know. If I had opposed the traitor openly, he would have taken my life and had me replaced with one of his lackeys. How could loyal men move against him then?" Wang Yun knelt before Liu Bei and pressed his head to the ground, begging for forgiveness and for trust. Liu Bei hesitated in the face of Wang Yun's story. But then he thought again of what Dongzhuo did to Luoyang, what his troops had done to its people, and how this cowering minister was feeding that monster. What mattered the excuse for it? What possible scheme of his could justify leaving his young daughter in the den of the mad usurper? Or leaving the emperor in chains for even a moment longer than needed just to preserve his own life? I would have given my life to stop the traitor and killed my own child rather than let them be taken, Liu Bei thought to himself. Whether Wang Yun was lying or telling the truth, he was wrong, Liu Bei reasoned. He gripped his sword, and Wang Yun's head soon rolled into the gutter. It would not be true to say that this was the last Liu Bei thought of the matter. While Zhang Fei and Guan Yu joined in the revelry of victory, Liu Bei found his nights to be sleepless, haunted by the secret of Wang Yun's words. Every time he reasoned again that nothing Wang Yun could have been planning justified his complicity with the tyrant, but for some reason the question returned to his mind without relent. The next week, Liu Bei travelled south to the city of Donghai. There he prostrated himself on the floor of Governor Taishan's court. After all the usual formalities were done and the story of Lang Ye was relayed, Liu Bei and his brothers merrily drank and ate with their patron late into the night. When things quietened down, Liu Bei asked Tao Chen for a tour of the garden and left his brothers with the courtesans in the main hall. "Lord, do you know anything of Wang Yun's purpose in serving the tyrant as he did?" Liu Bei asked. "A purpose? He was close to Dong Zhuo, being the highest of the ministers. Who can tell what relationship they had in the capital? Tao Chen said. You're right. It is only that I can't bring myself to believe that a man whose clan received such generous support from the imperial house would abandon his obligations, even to protect his own life. Even a long-lived clan such as his must eventually falter. It is like the Han. In these dark times, these great lines rely on heroes to correct their course and cleanse their ills. I am just an old fool, but I see such a hero in you, General Liu. This analysis did not make Liu Bei feel any better for what he did to Wang Yun, but for now he was forced to think on a different matter, as Tao Chen had made his point to service his own cause. Perhaps you will be the one who rescues me from my own downfall, Tao Chen said with a sigh. What possible cause for sighing do you have, Master? All loyal men sigh when they think of the state our emperor is kept in. I sigh doubly, for now it seems I will not live to see the Son of Heaven freed. Cao Cao covets these lands for his own, General Liu. Cao Cao. He was a valiant commander during the rebellion, Liu Bei recalled. And did he not already try to kill Dong Zhuo with his own hands, like a true servant of the Han? What quarrel has he with you? Since those days he has been an outlaw by the traitor Dong's decree. Since he can no longer receive rank from the capital, he saw fit to secure offices by force. You must have heard of how he seized the land around Chen Liu. He was claiming that the emperor had appointed him governor of Yan and asked me to stand down. After I refused, he resorted to a more devious scheme. He sent his father for audience with me. I did not understand the ploy and conceded nothing, of course. Then the captain, Jiang Kai, I sent to escort the elder Cao home, got drunk and ended up killing the fellow. That's what you get for trusting Yellow Turban defectors, remember that. Anyway, Cao Cao now claims I planned this from the beginning and calls up men to uphold his fictitious honor. That is terrible. That is the behavior of a tyrant, Liu Bei said. Tao Chen smiled widely. That was my thought as well. Of those who would slay Dong Zhuo, how many would merely replace him? Too many. That is why the only man I can trust in this matter is you, General Liu. Will you render great service to the Empire by stopping the warlord Cao? Liu Bei knelt, saluted, and thanked Tao Chen for the trust in this matter, agreeing without any reservations. Tao Chen was delighted, and the night's feasting was renewed. However, Tao and Liu together had few troops, and Cao Cao was well known as a cunning general in command of heroic battlefield champions, the cream of the men who had risen to answer the Empire's call. Tao Chen understood this well, and knew that only with a man like Liu Bei could he enact his scheme to overcome such raw strength. What was Tao Chen's plan? Read on. Brother, can we trust Tao Chen? He has our elder brother at his beck and call, Zhang Fei said to Guan Yu. Governor Chan understands the symptoms of corruption well. He saw it in Minister Wang and in General Cao. Elder brother is no different to a doctor's knife. Without one, the other has no use. I've a use for a knife without it, doctor. Ah, then you have become the doctor too, brother, Guan Yu said with a smile. Zhang Fei couldn't help but laugh. Ahead of them, Liu Bei called the marching column to a halt. At his side, Mi Ju pointed out at a village flanked by a sprawling forest, gleaming white under thick snow. This is the village Lord Chan spoke of, he reported. I see. Yet I fear our enterprise here is folly. Who am I to disturb the people with claims to office? There is no one else who should dare, but for you it is the opposite. Daring not to fulfill your responsibility is the offense, Mi Ju explained. Liu Bei nodded, and the march soon continued. Tao Chan had tasked Liu Bei with gathering men and monies from the coastal territories of Qingzhou. Only with such support could the governor hope to stand against the aggression of rogue General Cao Cao, and only with the reputation and lineage of Liu Bei could this support be given without becoming a rogue also. About a mile outside the village, Liu Bei came across a man on his knees in the middle of the road, sinking into the snow. To his flank were a set of tents, weapons on display on the racks outside. "General Liu, long have I heard of your noble name and dreamed of meeting you. Finally heaven blesses me with this opportunity," the man said, his voice shaken by the cold. Liu Bei greeted him and followed him inside one of the tents, Guan Yu and Zhang Fei following closely with weapons in hand. They drank some warm wine and soon got to business. "Governor Tao Chen advised me that you have committed a heinous crime against the empire," Liu Bei said. The man, the local county prefect, went even whiter in the face than he had been before. "I assure you that there must be some mistake," he spluttered out. "No mistake here, weasel. You're in league with Wang Yun. You pledged your support to the traitor Dong," Zhang Fei said. "That's not true. Dong Zhuo sent troops to strong-arm as mere prefects all over the commandery." "If it was troops, then why did you not fight them?" Guan Yu asked. It would have been impossible, sir." "I did not ask what you thought the result would be." "My apologies. I admit perhaps there was more I could have done to disrupt the traitors' encroachments, but I was too afeared. Until recently, I had held great shame for this failure." "What do you mean, until recently?" Liu Bei asked. "I have said too much. Forgive me." The official stood and begged his leave, but Liu Bei insisted he stay. Eventually he was convinced to continue his point. "I speak only of what happened to Minister Wang." Now it was Liu Bei's face going white, while Zhang Fei and Guan Yu glanced at each other in confusion. "It is true that as a man of no military note, I could only act against the traitor by first helping him to win my chance. But how could I know if that was heaven's will? The fate of Wang Yun shows that I was correct to await a hero with heaven's favor instead." Zhang Fei and Guan Yu had some questions about what was being implied, but Liu Bei bid them remain silent and quickly concluded the meeting. It was agreed that this prefect would direct his revenues according to Tao Chan's plan from now on. The army continued up the coast. Word had gotten out that Liu Bei was demanding submission of the local officials, and as a result, they were all rushing to meet him on the road with horses, provisions, and troops. Further from Langye, there was no more talk of Wang Yun's alleged conspiracy. These officials were merely doing what they had learned was best when Dong Zhuo took power. If a warlord comes with an army, you bruise your forehead on the road before him and say whatever need be said. Liu Bei was a little different though. He helped you up and offered you a smile before he made his demands. He also claimed to be restoring the old order of the Han, but so had Dong Zhuo's adjutants 2 years prior. By the coming of spring, Liu Bei had Langye Commandery under his control. By midsummer, Donglai Commandery joined them, now giving the imperial kinsman a de facto domain large enough to make him a governor in his own right. The people were cautious, feeling like they were being led away from the embrace of the emperor, but Liu Bei ensured that all was set to order in Langye and Donglai. Within weeks, the corrupt officials that plagued the empire were replaced with men hand-picked by Liu Bei himself. Calls to reduce their powers were deemed tyrannical in their own way. Such were decisions for the emperor to make, not a mere general, nor even a second marquis. This latter rank was bestowed upon Liu Bei by none other than Dong Zhuo himself. The message reminded him that the revenues of Langye and Donglai were still owed to the capital, just as it had always been. Liu Bei took the seal of the marquis and returned the rest of the accompanying gifts with a pledge to serve the emperor, not the Prime Minister Dong. At the end of summer, Liu Bei was taking his army back to Shu province, escorting a train of supplies, monies and weapons for Tao Qian's stand against Cao Cao. Before he arrived, a band of horsemen rushed up and urgently summoned him to Donghai. Tao Qian had fallen ill, and it was said he had not long left. Liu Bei and his brothers rode day and night to reach the city, but arrived to find the flags of mourning arrayed on the gatehouse. Liu Bei was moved to tears, saying, "Though the emperor is young, without men like Tao Qian, he will never live to see the empire restored. My uncaring conduct is to blame." While his brothers consoled him, the gates opened and a large group of Tao Qian's court officials came out to welcome Liu Bei. They were eager to speak with him, but Liu Bei waved them all away and retired to the guest house. He refused to come out for several days, and when he finally answered the summons to attend court, he told them, "When a loyal man dies, it is to House Liu like losing an arm. Even the single thread that connects me to the Son of Heaven is enough to show me what our Emperor must feel. How can we carry on with our daily business when heaven itself shrinks for the loss of Tao Chen?" At this, some of the officials began to tear up also. Many of them were speaking with hands over their mouths to each other, pulling on each other's robes and quietly begging each other of something. It was just as Liu Bei had secretly hoped during his last couple of nights in the guest house. Guan Yu nodded to him, seeing the proceedings also. In the light of Liu Bei's imperial performance, some conclusion was arrived at among the officials, and then Mi Ju, who was overseeing the court as regent, brought out a bolt of white silk bearing a carefully painted message. "Marquis Liu, this is the will of Lord Tao Chen," he said. "He had desperately wanted to see you before he passed, but was contented to give you this charge should he not have the fortune. With the empire in chaos, there is no chance for a new governor to be appointed. Given the service you have already rendered to the empire, and given your imperial blood, Lord Tao Chen begs that you will take up this heavy responsibility and lead Shu province against the traitors Dong and Cao alike." Liu Bei, looking astounded, accepted the charge at only modest insistence. Mi Ju offered up his seat, and without ado, Liu Bei was lifted from Marquis to Provincial Governor, a rank held only by a handful of men across the land. Before him the officials bowed down. Zhang Fei and Guan Yu did also, but Liu Bei waved his brothers up. "With the help of all of you," Liu Bei said, "we are certain to bring justice upon the villains of the land. I will pledge to work tirelessly in the Emperor's name, so that the people can return to their lives in peace." Thus, Liu Bei joined the long list of warlords who had pledged the same across the country, and like them, his first act was to mobilize the army against a rival. Cao Cao, who had taken governorship of a province in a fashion similar to Liu, was planning to conquer Shu. Liu Bei was determined to strike first. Returning people to their peaceful lives was the end point of his plan, it can be assumed. For now, he marched over 2,000 men to attack Chen Commandery, the region Tao Chen had been contesting with Cao for the better part of a year. Cao had 2,000 men also here, but they had no one to match the ferocity of Zhang Fei, the fortitude of Guan Yu, or the determination of Liu Bei. When the two sides met, there was no negotiation. Liu Bei directed his archers to pierce the ranks of the halberdiers under Cao's banners. Where it was not fatal, the whistling and thudding of arrows threw the victims into confusion. Some charged forwards to take revenge on the archers, but Liu's own men charged too to begin a brutal melee. Without direction, the Cao army was split and crushed from all sides by attacks led by Guan Yu and Zhang Fei. "Look, brothers," Zhang Fei said, holding up a captured banner. It read, "Those who expel the bandits." "They were carrying this without any shame. I say we take it for ourselves." "Indeed," Guan Yu agreed. "Cao Cao is no better than a bandit, using this chaos to rob loyal men like Tao Chen and further his own ambitions." "What do you think his ambition could be?" Liu Bei asked. "That's obvious. He wishes to follow the example of the traitor Dong," Zhang Fei answered. "Brother, do not have second thoughts. Cao Cao may be an official of the empire, but a bandit who steals a book is not a scholar. We remove corrupt men from the Han, no matter how low or how high, from robber to tyrant. That is how the chaos is stilled." Reassured, Liu Bei concluded the rounding up of survivors and sent messages to the various nearby counties to denounce the Governor Cao. Most returned replies at once, offering themselves to Liu's superior claim and virtue, but one message was returned in a different fashion. A company of armoured riders carrying Han banners arrived at Liu Bei's camp. It was none other than Cao Cao himself. "Do you remember the day we defeated Zhang Jue?" Cao Cao asked once the formalities were concluded and wine was served. "How could I forget? The rebellion was ended that day. It was the happiest day of my life," Liu Bei said. "For me also. It was a great dishonor that you did not receive proper recognition for your service. Such was the blindness of the palace. I see now that heaven has favored you where men did not." Cao Cao gestured towards the "Those Who Expel Bandits" banner draped over a stand in the corner of Liu Bei's tent. "That is an award given to servants of the Han court. You have served them before, but you do not now. Please do not feel any resentment about the banner," Liu Bei said snidely. "And yet I did expel bandits. If the Han court disagrees, does that change the course of history?" A funny thing to suggest. You suggested it. No, the Han court itself suggests it. After all, are you not the Han court here today? That is why you have come to my home to kill my people, is it not? "Do not insult the imperial governor," Guan Yu demanded from behind Liu Bei. Cao Cao held up his hands and apologized. "I mean no insult, just as a magistrate must state the record of a defendant from a neutral perspective. I ask you, Governor Liu, to tell me why you are here." "Cao Cao, you have been openly using the confusion among the imperial house to pursue your own goals without punishment. You stole Yan province, and you would have Shu province too. You distinguished yourself against the rebels, but then sullied any virtues you might have by turning to rebellion yourself. That is why I can no longer permit you to brandish stolen titles or speak for the Han." Cao Cao looked from Liu Bei to Zhang Fei to Guan Yu, meeting the stern expression from each. Then he burst out laughing. Amid the laughter he stood and walked away from the table. Liu Bei was about to motion for the guards to block him, but Cao stopped and picked up a bronze mirror. He returned it to the table and set it in front of himself. His laughter ceased, and he turned it to face Liu Bei. "Say it again, Governor Liu. Speak the words you more than anyone must hear," Cao Cao said. "Enough of this!" Zhang Fei blurted out. He moved to seize Cao Cao, but Liu Bei and Guan Yu held him back. "If you're not going to talk, then this is a waste of our time," Liu Bei said. "A waste? No, not at all. This meeting has made me realize something. When it was the Han who brought the land to ruin, and others who are seeking to repair it, is it not true that to say you fight for the Han is just as much poison to the ears of the people as to say you are a mere bandit? Yes, you've pointed that out to me most clearly. It gives me a rather good idea." "Go, General Cao, and fetch your army," Liu Bei said. "Governor Cao, but yes, you are right, that is a rank of the Han, so why sully myself with it? Wait right here, and we shall decide this as mere generals. I'll speak for the Han no more in the meantime. Please take pleasure in that, if you will." With these facetious remarks, Cao took his leave and returned south with his cavalry guards. The brothers were left fuming in their tent. "The traitor Cao takes the empire for a jest. He is more dangerous than Huang Shao, I am certain of it," Guan Yu said. "The corruption takes many forms," Liu Bei said. "Even those who seem loyal will grasp at any chances for power and lose their mind. We'll have to be careful to root out such people, lest the Han not merely fall, but the empire cease to be and heaven crashes to earth." "Don't worry, elder brother," Zhang Fei said. "Once we're on the battlefield, his idiocy will be ended by honest steel, and that'll be the end of it." Liu Bei was reinforced by Tao Chen's troops from around Chen, and together they marched south to meet Cao Cao in battle. Scouts reported that an army had been seen moving towards them. There was no mistaking that it was Cao Cao, for this force did not have Han banners, but newly made Cao ones. Cao Cao would speak for the Han, no more. The leading banner gave Cao's rank as the general who reforms mankind. The army he led was filled with veteran troops, freshly supplied from Yanzhou. Liu's men had marched season after season carrying out Tao Chan's plan, and were said to be whispering among themselves in the evenings. Liu Bei puzzled over what to do about the impending battle, until suddenly a man presented himself in the command tent. It was Zhuge Liang, Tao Chan's lead strategist, and now, begrudgingly, Liu Bei's lead strategist. "Governor Liu," he said, "I have devised a way to win this battle without effort and secure the future of Shu province. Please allow me to explain." What was Zhuge Liang suggesting? Read on. Word was sent around the men to remain hushed. Once there was no noise among the army, but for the wind through the trees above them, they could just about make out the thudding of feet on the road. Cao Cao's column was approaching the site of the ambush. "No word from Chuishuan," Guan Yu noted. "We must be careful." "We don't need those weaklings from Chen," Zhang Fei said. "I have faith in your skills, brother," Liu Bei said. But still, he agreed to march when we gave him the signal. Now battle is upon us, and he shall have to stake his life on answers to my questions when this is done. "So be it, brother. The corrupt are high and low," Guan Yu reminded him. Liu Bei nodded and dispatched his brothers to wait along the tree line with the soldiers. As the absent Chuishuan had predicted, Cao Cao's army was taking a route that would bring them right underneath the wooded copse Liu's force was concealed in. The thudding march grew louder, and the front ranks of the column began to pass, with Cao Cao himself, adorned in what appeared to be imperial court robes, sitting at the front. Cao seemed to slow down a little and look around. There was a smoke signal on a hill further down the road. It was nothing Liu Bei had arranged for, and seeing it prompted Cao Cao to halt the column and draw his sword. It was now or never. A deafening chorus of horns rang out from the woods, and Liu Bei's men sprang from cover, brandishing swords, spears and bows. Zhang Fei and Guan Yu burst into the center of the column, where Cao Cao's top general, Xiahou Dun, was riding beside another officer. Xiahou Dun motioned for his companion to flee, while he himself rode to challenge Guan Yu and Zhang Fei. "Get the other one, brother!" Guan Yu called. He struck out with a mighty sweep of the green dragon saber, and Xiahou Dun tumbled from his horse. The other officer, in light armor, saw Liu troops all around and hesitated for too long. Zhang Fei caught up, and a duel commenced. Battle raged up and down the column, with Liu's men having surprise on their side, but not the wealth of experience their foe could count on. Cao Cao directed his troops into close order and told them they would win. They believed their general without second thought, and none fled the scene. Zhang Fei roared, and his serpent spear cut cleanly through the neck of his skinny opponent. He picked the head up and was about to place it on the tip of his spear, but was taken aback when he removed the helmet. This draining, limp face was that of a woman. Enraged that he had been deceived, he turned back and called out to Xiahou Dun. "Scandalous mongrel! You place some woman under an officer's clothes?" Xiahou Dun parried away a blow from Guan Yu. Guan Yu halted, nodding to Xiahou Dun and giving him time to make an answer. However, the sight of the head Zhang Fei wielded had Xiahou Dun speechless. "Lady Bian, I have failed," he said, dropping to his knees. Then he looked over to Guan Yu. "Kill me, General Guan. I don't deserve to die at hands as lauded as yours, yet I ask for this one indulgence." "I would grant any indulgence to one who fights as well as you, but if you will not stand, I will not act," Guan Yu said. "Your brother has slain Lady Bian, who I swore to protect with my life. I cannot bear to face Lord Cao, even to receive my punishment. Kill me now!" Guan Yu shook his head and joined Zhang Fei in a venture into the chaos of battle around them. Xiahou Dun, with tears forming, cried out, drew a short dagger and thrust it into his own eye. Without delay he pulled dagger and eye both out and hurriedly placed them beside Lady Bian's body. With that, he mounted the lady's horse and rode on to the front of the column, towards Cao Cao. Guan Yu and Zhang Fei were cutting apart Cao's ranks all around them, yet they had scarce few allied troops left. Liu Bei was close by, surrounded by enemies also. "Where is that traitor Chuishuan?" Zhang Fei called. There was still no sign of him. "Brother, we must end this battle at once," Guan Yu said. He pointed up the road, where Cao Cao was visible among a melee of horsemen. "About time! Leave this to me, brother. I can't leave with only some woman's head." Zhang Fei stomped up the gentle hill to challenge Cao Cao to battle. Cao's blade was covered in blood from the fighting, but his dress was undisturbed. "Traitor Cao! Is this all you have for me?" Zhang Fei called, holding up his prize head. Cao Cao's face went purple, and then he thundered out with sword raised. "You shameless brigand! You cursed monster! Even your head will not be enough to fulfill my vow to Lady Bian!" he shouted. For a man wearing formal clothing, his skill at arms was surprising. Caring not for his lack of armor, he slashed and kicked at Zhang Fei without relent, tears pinging on his golden girdle as they fell from his eyes. Zhang Fei was unable to withstand the onslaught, and finally he stumbled, letting the point of Cao's sword into his stomach. "Brother!" Guan Yu shouted from behind him. He had been rushing up to aid Zhang Fei, and now challenged Cao to combat. Cao grabbed Lady Bian's head, then charged without comment. He knocked Guan Yu aside with a sweeping blow, and then rode on towards the carpet of bodies at the column's center. "Brother Zhang, what happened?" Guan Yu asked as he reached Zhang Fei's side. "He tricked me with his clothes, just like that woman. Deceit from start to finish," Zhang Fei grumbled. There were horns, and from the tree line more troops appeared. It was Chu Xuan, leading 1,000 troops from Pengcheng. The remnants of Cao's army finally scattered, and the battle was won. Cao, with Lady Bian's body across his horse, was speeding away into the woods. Zhang Fei was seen to by local doctors and was on his feet again within days. The same cannot be said of some 1,000 of Liu Bei's troops who had died in the battle or in the days following it. The fighting had taken a brutal toll and still left the animosity between Liu Bei and Cao unresolved. That was why the army was soon on the move again, heading towards Cao Cao's new camp in Yangzhou Commandery. Now mostly relying on Tao Chen's men, Liu Bei had Chu Xuan at his side. "Lady Bian was Cao Cao's wife," the strategist explained. "If we strike at once while he is still in mourning, then victory will be guaranteed." "As guaranteed as it was last time," Zhang Fei growled. "The messenger responsible for the delay has been executed. This will ensure it does not happen again," was Chu Xuan's excuse. "Would it not be an affront to attack Lord Cao before the period of mourning is over?" Liu Bei asked. "Nonsense! If he expects we will not attack him, then we must. This is the basic essence of strategy," Chu Xuan said. "Brother, this mourning affair was Cao Cao's own doing," Guan Yu said. "Why did he hide his own wife in among the troops? Such an unusual act cannot be accounted for in the weighing of right and wrong roads. Cao's own disregard for the proper treatment of a noblewoman voids his right to mourn in peace. And if it was a deliberate ploy, then we must hurry to avenge Lady Bian as soon as possible." This settled any doubt, and Liu Bei took his army to challenge Cao to battle once again. Cao's army formed up outside their camp the next morning, and Liu arranged his lines opposite them. Guan Yu and Zhang Fei led the flanks, leaving Liu Bei in the center with Chu Xuan. Xiahou Dun appeared from among the Cao banners and called out for Liu Bei himself to fight. Liu Bei seemed unsure, but Chu Xuan said to him, "This warrior is renowned, however he is only here because Cao wishes to punish his failure. He must be unable to fight on account of his wounds. Cao hopes that you will refuse based on his reputation alone, and thus set a poor example to the men. If you seek victory, simply strike him down, and Cao will realize you've seen through his trick and flee." This advice spurred Liu Bei to go out and fight. "You're a good man, Governor Liu," Xiahou Dun said. "However, if I cannot take your head to satisfy the despair of my lord, then I need not live on any further. Let us fight without second thoughts." Unfortunately for Liu Bei, Xiahou Dun was not at all weakened by his wounds. Liu had to give everything he had just to keep Xiahou Dun's spear at bay, and his breath soon grew short. With Guan Yu and Zhang Fei facing enemies on the flanks, he had no choice but to flee. Xiahou Dun was enraged and looked around for a horse. Before he found one, a Liu horseman appeared and spirited Liu Bei from the field. Having failed his lord for a second time, Xiahou Dun just stood there, paying no heed to the growing battle as the two armies clashed en masse around him. Some of Liu's troops got close and tried to strike at him. Xiahou Dun's spear cut them down as easily as it sailed through open air. Nearby, Cao had joined the charge and was in among Liu Bei's lines. Zhang Fei was galloping from the left flank to avenge himself of his embarrassment, but before he arrived, Cao came upon Chu Xuan. "You villain!" Cao Cao called. "It was because of your schemes that Lady Bian was killed. Liu Bei has fled like a rat, so your head will have to do me for today." Before Chu Xuan could protest, Cao Cao's gilded sword cleaved through his robes and threw him to the ground. The strategist's head remained untaken, however, as a roaring Zhang Fei spooked Cao Cao back to his own lines. The sight of Cao running inspired many of his men to do the same, and with the combined valour of Zhang Fei and Guan Yu bearing down on them, the army as a whole was soon put to flight. That is, but for a single warrior, still standing in the middle of the battlefield. It was Xiahou Dun, surrounded by a pile of Liu's soldiers. Arrows hissed down at him, but he used his spear to swat them away, or merely let them clank off his armour. A company of sword-wielding troops charged the general, but he was like a breakwater. Men fell left and right, and Xiahou Dun remained unmoved. "Brother, that Xiahou Dun has a death wish. Let me kill him. Cao Cao ran from me," Zhang Fei said. "He is not to be taken lightly," Guan Yu said. "He's been abandoned by his lord and seeks an honourable escape from his suffering. He is a man worthy of serving the Han. Let's try to bring him to elder brother alive. We can kill him then, if we must." Guan Yu and Zhang Fei circled Xiahou Dun and called for him to throw down his weapon. "I will accept death from either of you," he said, "yet I will also accept your heads. Let these weapons clash so that heaven can decide who will be the last to fall on this battlefield." With this, Xiahou Dun started swiping at the mounted brothers. The blows were easily beaten away. Guan Yu saw a chance, and with a mighty heave he caught the end of Xiahou Dun's spear on his sabre, and the metal tip was torn off. Then Zhang Fei jumped down and used his bearish strength to wrestle the shaft from Xiahou Dun's hand, taking a barrage of kicks and punches as he did. Guan Yu called up some men carrying ropes, and with the two horses they quickly wrapped the general up faster than he could bite and claw the binds away. At last he slumped over, cursed the heavens for his fate, and went limp. Back in the camp, Xiahou Dun was placed before a recovering Liu Bei, now with only his hands bound. "You only extend my failure by keeping me alive, General Liu," Xiahou Dun said. "That is not sure. What is failure and what is success if not determined by men, but by the traditions of good practice and heavenly fealty? To die in service of a man like Cao Cao cannot be considered success, and to live in service of the emperor cannot be considered failure." Xiahou Dun smiled as Liu Bei ended his recital. "You wish to say that if I serve you instead, I will make my prior mistakes into favours. Those thoughts come cheap and mean nothing. Why say this? I'm expelling corrupt officials from this land and restoring the peace of the Eternal Han. What person could say that doing this is merely a cheap thought? Let me give you an example. You drove the corrupt officials from Langye and Donglai and took the power of their offices for yourself. Thus you protect those beneath the auspices of each from the tyranny of those above. So you say. Another man did that, if you remember. He killed the eunuchs that brought the empire to the brink of collapse and took up their powers himself, unable to trust anyone with such tainted office. Then he used his power to restore order and protect the emperor. His name is Dong Zhuo, and your proclamations against him hang on the same walls as your claims to be governor of Shu, magistrate of Langye, chief prefect of Donglai, and now the imperial inspector of Yan. At least Dong Zhuo contents himself to use his powers to live in leisure. He does not use it to conquer and kill his neighbours. Further to this, do you recall who tried to kill Dong Zhuo with his own hands and has been harried and betrayed by the court because of it? Cavalry Commander Cao Cao was his name. Now you call him traitor too. So, Lord Liu Bei, in the light of all this, and in the midst of all these so-called traitors, how is it meaningful for you to claim that forsaking Cao Cao and bowing to you is anything more than common treachery? Liu Bei was left speechless, and Xiahou Dun began to laugh. Please, my lord, please do not take these words too seriously, Xiahou Dun said. I admonish you for my own sake. After all, you have pledged to slay the traitor Dong, the man who killed my uncle in the imperial court. Is that not enough? If you'll use me, I'll kill him for you, just as I would kill him for General Cao. But know that following you is no better to me than following him. I can serve the Emperor either way, and with heaven bringing me here despite my disgrace, I see that I must serve. After all that, Xiahou Dun agreed to go to Donghai as a hostage, unbound and supplied with fresh clothes. Xiahou Dun's words had Liu Bei on edge, angry that he did not have an easy response to those arguments. Even Zhang Fei and Guan Yu could not cheer him up, and his moping carried on for several days. Then a visitor was announced in the camp. The name was Zhao Yun, and upon hearing this, Liu Bei leapt to his feet and rushed to meet him, dressed only in his night clothes. Who was this Zhao Yun? Read on. Liu Bei shared cup after cup of warm wine with his old comrade Zhao Yun. Zhao Yun had been a general in the service of Gongsun Zan, one of Liu Bei's fellow students in their teenage years in a government academy. This Gongsun Zan had risen to become a governor in the far north, while Liu Bei, who never made it beyond the basics in his scholarly pursuits, had been cast back onto the street without office, as his father before him had been. Despite exiting imperial education in very much opposite directions, they had renewed their bond by fighting together during the worst of the rebellion. There, Liu Bei had met Zhao Yun, and the two had become firm friends. Warmed by the wine, Liu Bei admitted a deep concern to Zhao Yun. Though I have come further than I dreamed possible in these last 2 years, and have been entrusted with grave responsibilities to the Empire, I cannot help but feel I am unworthy of it. Of all the men in the land, only you would dare question your worth in such a manner, my lord, and yet only you need not question it at all, Zhao Yun said. You have only just arrived, but you're so sure of this. My lord, when a man proves that he is of the utmost integrity and compassion on just a single occasion, there is no need to fear that he will act any differently when out of your sight. You are widely praised as a ruler who displays both vigor and humility. Who else can say that? Surely Gongsun Zan meets those criteria. Alas, he fails to see the importance of the times we've been served. He cannot bring himself to rescue the Empire. Finally, I saw that I could not dally there a moment longer, and came to you. No one else is so righteous or so worthy of the scraps of use I may provide. Please do not forget your path and purpose. The people and Emperor both rely on you alone. This shining review cheered Liu Bei up a good measure, and he at last returned his thoughts to the matter of removing the conniving Governor Cao Cao from office. Zhao Yun joined Liu Bei's court, becoming the commander of Tao Chen's army, and thus removing any connection they once had to the former governor for good. Zhao Yun went north to investigate a Han magistrate said to still be submitting Jews to the false capital at Chang'an. Liu Bei and his brothers moved south towards Cao Cao's seat of power, the city of Yangzhou. The banners on the wall bore no sign of the general who reforms mankind, but they did bear the name Cao Ren, a member of Cao Cao's noble clan. As Liu Bei's army approached the city in the depth of winter, Cao Ren was infuriated. "How dare that rat come here when Lady Bian has not been properly mourned?" he shouted to his assembled officials. "Who will come with me to punish this traitor and avenge our lady?" "That would not be wise," a voice said. It was Guo Jia, one of Cao Cao's top strategists. "You think I cannot overcome them? To me, Guan Yu is just an ungroomed soldier dressed in fine silks, and Zhang Fei is an empty-headed brute who will trip on his own spear at any moment. Why are you questioning my decision? The snow grows deeper by the day. Why lift a finger to defeat those inconsequential rebels? Let their men's spirits wither outside, and then we can deal with them easily. Is anyone else too cowardly to serve our lord? What would he say if he learned I'd let the traitor Liu stand outside my city without so much as an arrow fired? Our enterprise would become a laughingstock. We shall attack in the morning, and any who refuse will be executed." The order was carried out, and most of the military officials of Yangzhou braved the falling snow and icy winds beyond the city walls. There they came upon Liu Bei's army, arrayed in battle formation on the other side of a river. "General Cao, we must not attack," Guo Jia advised. "The river may be shallow at this time of year, but it is also bitterly cold. Liu wants our men to lose their agility by crossing it. Furthermore, it is said that men from Yi province have instructed their archers, and they are particularly fine. With these factors together, it would be impossible to approach him from the front. He is counting on us doing just that." Perhaps. Before Guo Jia could continue, Cao Ren roared out and drew his sword. "The traitor is right before our eyes, and you still demoralize the men by speaking of him with such a reverent tone. I've had enough. We attack at once." The Cao troops, grumbling and disorderly, marched for the freezing river. "Release the arrows!" Liu Bei called. The missiles fell and stained the sparkling river flow with streaks of blood. Cao soldiers pulled themselves forwards through the water with their halberds, but their wet clothes anchored them in place even when they reached the opposite bank. The arrows continued to fall, and that any portion of Cao Ren's army made it across was due only to the bodies of the fallen partially damming the river. Hearing the cries of those in the river, Guan Yu and Zhang Fei began their own crossings up and down stream, allowing them to appear at Cao Ren's rear while the army was only half across. Seeing all this, Guo Jia sighed and slipped away. Finally, a sizable group of Cao troops made it across the river, and they followed Cao Ren in a charge right towards Liu Bei's banner. Liu's men appeared to meet them, and battle was joined. Cao Ren cut a path forwards to reach Liu Bei himself. "Traitor Liu, a man who speaks of virtue but dares not show it. The type of man cousin Cao will eradicate in his new order," Cao Ren growled. "I'll listen not to talk of virtue from you, the rat that follows the dog," Liu Bei retorted. The two leaders crossed swords. However, Liu Bei's lack of study was very much related to his boyhood fascination with martial arts, and so while he was of only mediocre ability in that regard, Cao Ren did not find the quick justice he sought. Ren eventually cursed the heavens and ran, losing his nerve for being so deep in enemy lines. Guan Yu and Zhang Fei oversaw the destruction of the dry portion of the Cao force, while the wet portion, seeing this and already unsettled by the miserable circumstances, fled or surrendered to Liu's men. Cao Ren was dashing about imploring otherwise, but his voice was unheard. Quickly it was he alone with weapon still in hand. With a final curse he fled. However, over his shoulder he saw Liu Bei riding after him. He bid his steed go faster, but it was already exhausted. The pursuing horse arrived with unbelievable speed, and before Cao Ren could turn to defend himself, Liu's blade was in his back. Their victory complete, the Liu army attended to the aftermath hastily, leaving the Cao bodies blocking the river in place so that they could quickly bring their baggage train across the same day. A short distance down the road, they saw a man tapping a rhythm on a fallen tree trunk he sat upon, singing, "Heroes high, heroes low, the crane embraces the fish. Agreed that to the future, the people make a tender bridge." Liu Bei summoned the man to him, and he introduced himself as none other than Guo Jia. The strategist offered to show Liu Bei the best way to secure Yangzhou in exchange for his life. Liu Bei clapped with delight and welcomed Guo Jia into his retinue. "What if this is his ruse to become Cao Cao's inside man?" Guan Yu asked. "Do not be so suspicious. Good men are trapped in the service of the bad across the land. If we are not welcoming, how will they avoid becoming like Wang Yun?" Liu Bei scolded him, and nothing more was said of the matter. To the north, Zhao Yun had built a winter camp for his men on the border of Tao Chen's old farmlands in Chen Commandery. On the same day as the battle near Yangzhou, he was foraging in the nearby woods with his men when a sudden gust of wind blew an old tree over. It fell, pointing in the direction of his camp. Zhao Yun raced back, and when he arrived, he thanked heaven for its aid. Cao Cao had a detachment of troops approaching the camp, and the men inside were panicking. "Gather your weapons, soldiers! I will deal with them for now," Zhao Yun said, dashing out of the camp and facing off against the approaching raid. "Halt! This camp is under the protection of Lord Liu Bei. Who dares approach it under arms?" "You should have surrendered at once, whoever you are," a voice replied. "We've no patience for pretenders. Best to kill you now and be rid of you." "I am Zhao Yun of Changshan. Now you'll know it as long as you live," Zhao Yun called, jumping forwards and bounding into the Cao lines with spear outstretched. He ploughed through the foot soldiers as easily as the night's snowfall and embroiled himself with the attack group's officers behind them. Seeing such faultless valour, one of Tao Qian's top warriors, Gao Ding, burst from the camp also and joined him. Zhao Yun's soldiers got organised and arrayed themselves just outside the camp, meeting the delayed arrival of Cao's men in good order. Zhao Yun saw his banners in their proper places and stopped worrying about his camp. With renewed vigour, he rained a string of blows upon the Cao commander, who dropped their sword and fled when they realised Zhao Yun's flurry showed no signs of ending. Someone among the foot soldiers realised their leader was fleeing, and within moments the whole group made their exit, ending the raid almost as soon as it had begun. Only one man stayed behind. It was Chang Heng, a lowly retainer of Cao who dared not turn his back to Gao Ding, his current opponent. Zhao Yun rode over to observe the two fighting. Both men were panting for breath, but neither was faltering in their form. Some men from the camp arrived and asked Zhao Yun to help their commander. Zhao Yun shook his head and said, "Life and death are not important concerns. Any warrior is happy to die if the proper customs of battle are respected." So saying, he watched on as the two men battered each other with increasing desperation. With Zhao Yun watching and loudly moralizing nearby, neither could live with anything but victory now. Eventually, Gao Ding lunged forwards in a last-ditch effort, and his spear ran Chang Heng through. Zhao Yun was finally satisfied that the victory was worthy of celebration and returned to camp. By the time he was ready to continue his journey north to the city of Yingchuan, Guo Jia was standing before the gates of Yangzhou with a column of Cao prisoners at his back. The guards called out for the gates to be opened to let their strategist in, but as soon as they did so, the sound of war drums rolled out from behind Guo Jia, and Liu Bei, Guan Yu and Zhang Fei stormed into the city. Guo Jia sighed once more and sat beneath a tree where the sounds of the chaos within the walls would not reach him. Cao Cao was nowhere to be found, but his household effects were still lying around the magistrate's office. The servant said he had fled a week prior with a few riders. Liu Bei was back to sulking, his victory soured by the injustice of Cao's escape. "Take heart, brother. Without Yangzhou he is without the office he laid claim to. Now Cao Cao is nothing more than a bandit," Guan Yu said. "He'll not content himself to a mountainside lair," Liu Bei lamented. "He might even flee to Dongzhuo. What a league of villains they would make." "Why so glum, brother?" Zhang Fei asked. "We're standing here in Cao Cao's inner sanctum, and he was said to be a military genius. What will stop us walking from here to the Emperor's chambers?" Nodding, Liu Bei agreed to see light in his victory and got to work organising the city. The seal of the governor of Yan was missing, but Liu Bei had a fresh seal made in its place and wore it around his neck as he presided over the city court. Many people came to offer gifts, but Liu Bei dismissed any unimportant visitors after too many asked after the fate of so-called Governor Cao. Giving the guards discretion over such matters caused a critical piece of news to be delayed. Taishan had been overrun by an army of Yellow Turban rebels. Under the auspices of Huang Shao, the city of Dong had been mobilized into a fresh revolutionary army. Taishan fell without much resistance. Liu Bei's promise to the people had been broken, and Huang Shao's had been kept. But the wielder of the Heavenly Way had promised to heal the entire empire, so the fate of Liu Bei's Shu province was now quite uncertain. Only Zhao Yun's troops were anywhere near the scene of the action, but they had a more urgent matter to attend to. The magistrate of Yingchuan, Chen Ji, had come from the city to attack Zhao Yun. He led 1,000 Han Empire men and rode beneath a banner that read, "General who stills chaos." They spotted Zhao Yun camped on the hillside and advanced in battle formation to challenge him. Zhao Yun formed his men into 2 lines and began showering the Han troops with arrows. Then he rode out alone, forced his way past the soldiers, and found Chen Ji at their rear. "Do not interfere with the restoration of the Han!" Zhao Yun shouted. "Huh, every bandit in the land claims to restore the Han. Were it not for all you, Prime Minister Dong would have done so already," Chen Ji retorted, sheathing his sword and turning his back on Zhao Yun. Zhao Yun growled, but did not dare disrespect the refusal to fight. He turned and was about to ride back to his lines, but Gao Ding was battling his way towards him. The wounds from the duel with Cheng Hung were reopened by the action, and he almost fell from his horse when he reached Zhao Yun's side. "General Gao, you've gone too far," Zhao Yun said. Gao Ding, ashamed, said nothing. "You must flee. But then what will the enemy soldiers think of us? Ah, that's it. We can raise the enemy's spirits so that they will see this battle through. That way, the traitors will not be able to return to safety. Will you do this for the Empire, General Gao?" Gao Ding agreed. He rode over to Chen Ji and held out his spear in challenge. Chen Ji eyed Gao Ding's broken armor, blood leaking through the sides. "The Emperor will reward me greatly for taking your head," he said, beginning the combat. Gao Ding put in a short performance, but then turned and fled before his poor condition got him into trouble. Chen Ji jeered, and his soldiers celebrated his victory with him. In their jubilation, they failed to see how Zhao Yun's men were pressing the front of their formation with deadly strength. In truth, the whole affair behind the front lines had separated the army and seen the vanguard overwhelmed, and this affair was still not over. Zhao Yun, now on foot, challenged Chen Ji a second time. Flushed with his victory over Gao Ding, Chen Ji agreed and began slashing out with his blade. Zhao Yun stepped around the blows effortlessly, predicting the direction of each slice even before it was made. He kept Chen Ji occupied for a short while until he saw all around him that the traitor Han troops were completely disorganized and starting to flee. Then, with one arcing sweep of his spear, Zhao Yun cut Chen Ji across the torso and said, "Magistrate, I hereby strip you of your office in the name of the Han. Return to the city. I will come to oversee your sentencing soon." Zhao Yun smiled and walked off to find his horse. Knowing he need not trouble Liu Bei with receiving news of such a trifling victory, he prepared to keep his promise to Chen Ji at the Yingchuan Magistrates' Hall. Liu Bei, sitting in a similar hall in Yangzhou, was instead subject to only bad news. Word of the Yellow Turban insurrection had the city trading secretive remarks, and now there was fresh trouble. Wang Lang, the administrator of Pangcheng on the edge of Shu province, had declared he would honor the imperial proclamation to slay the rogue warlords, starting with Liu Bei. Now Liu Bei was surrounded by enemies, with Huang Shao and the rebels in the north, Wang Lang in the east, and Cao Cao to the west and south. A loyal man would not dare shirk from his duty to purge their corruption, yet a wise man would not dare challenge the world to battle. Liu Bei had both types of men in good supply at the Yangzhou court. Which approach would he take? Read on. Guojia was led into a modest hall, nothing like the one he had departed from in Yangzhou. That this small county town had a magistrate's office at all was surprising. The markets sold only millet, and sheep walked freely around the courtyard of the office compound. There in that backwater in western Chen, Guojia walked in the shadow of Guan Yu to meet with Cao Cao. "Guojia, when I heard you had survived the battle, I was most relieved," Cao Cao said. "It was mere chance, a mercy I did not deserve," Guojia said. "No, no," Cao Cao waved. "Oh, but I suppose you wish me in chains sooner rather than later. Little in the way of wine here to pass the time, so shall we depart at once?" In response, Guan Yu threw a letter towards Cao Cao's table. Cao read it with amusement. "He thinks I've been sufficiently punished. Now this is true benevolence," he said, making a dramatic reach for the heavens. "Lord Cao, please do not be flippant," Guojia said. Governor Liu is willing to give you a second chance. After all, have you not heard that he is a man of integrity, compassion, and wisdom? All that and now you. Yes, he has it all, doesn't he? Everything except for this. Cao Cao picked up the imperial seal of office for Yan province and threw it down before Guojia. There you go, old friend, he continued. Consider your robbery a success. Good to do business, isn't it? I can offer you tea as well, but little else. I would offer my head, but what would a compassionate lord like Liu Bei do with another piece in his collection? Guojia could do nothing but retrieve the seal from his former master with his head bowed and try to keep tears from his eyes. As planned, he offered Cao Cao some meagre gifts in return for his compliance with Liu Bei's annexation of Yan, and returned to Yangzhou in silence. Were Guan Yu not at his side, there is no telling what his guilt might have had him do. At Yangzhou, Liu Bei had already mobilized his forces to return north. Guojia arrived to find members of the imperial court paying their respects to Liu Bei. They had an imperial seal of Yan of their own, identical in appearance to the one Guojia carried and the one already on the sconce beside Liu Bei's seat. With angry curses and a short diatribe on the illegitimacy of imperial courtiers under Dongzhuo's administration, Liu Bei refused the offer to disband his armies and accept official appointment to his two provinces. It must have been a tempting offer for a mere sandal weaver, but the righteousness of his decision was demonstrated by the execution of Chen Ji. Zhao Yun had personally chased the Han magistrate across Yingchuan and now returned his head to the city. Why fear giving your life to resist the tyrant Dong when a true servant of the emperor will ensure you give it either way? With such questions settling in, Yingchuan's officials came into Liu Bei's service. A proclamation went out to the various towns of Shu and Yan, explaining that until the function of the imperial court was restored, Liu Bei would be appointing all officers below him in person, acting as the imperial caretaker. Responses to this were slow to arrive, and when they did, it was as a large delegation of officials, led by one Liu Yao. Despite our kinship, I have never had the time to pay my respects to you. I apologize, Liu Bei said to him. Such an inconsequential man as myself requires no such deference, Liu Yao replied. In fact, it is I who should be scorned for not paying my respects to you. You are here now. That is more than I deserve, Liu Bei said. While it pains me to say it, as a loyal member of House Liu, I must agree. What is the meaning of that? Liu Bei asked, looking back at Zhang Fei and Guan Yu, whose brows were furrowing. We are here, my lord, to beg that you reconsider your mandate. Since time immemorial, peaceful times were presided over by those appointed by the emperor, and disastrous times were brought about by rogues. How can we allow you to administer the lands of the empire on your own, simply by virtue of your military achievements? Is that not the definition of tyranny? Taken aback, Liu Bei quickly explained, But the land is plagued by corruption and strife. To gather together good men and give them to the people as leaders, that is the only way to wrestle power from the traitor Dong. I understand that I'm asking for powers heaven does not give lightly, but with our house hanging by a thread, we must act accordingly. Lord Liu Bei, we have all long understood your good intentions. However, the letter of the law remains unchanged. You say that by submitting to you we can rescue the Han, but does that not entail serving a self-made tyrant in order to further a righteous cause? The loss of Wang Yun taught the whole empire the folly in that, did it not? Wang Yun was a traitor. He tried to marry his daughter to the tyrant. Who could let a father like that still walk the earth? Zhang Fei exploded. Guan Yu took him outside, but his tirade was still audible. As I said, I understand the nature of his treachery. That father and daughter both perished for it is lesson enough, Liu Yao said. So you will abandon the emperor and stand against me? Liu Bei asked. We had hoped to do neither, but you make it clear that a choice is to be made. Speaking for my branch of the house, I cannot begin to consider the former choice. Given the severity of the situation, I will not speak for the delegation on this matter. But the delegation agreed with Liu Yao wholeheartedly. The officials, including the powerful lords of Guanling, Zhang Chao and Zerong, left Liu Bei's court to discuss the gathering of weapons and men. "How could all these fine men hate the empire so? What more must I do?" Liu Bei called out in frustration. Eager to find someone making a more honest effort to resist the empire's destruction, Liu Bei sent a message of solidarity to the custodian of the capital districts, Yuan Shu, who was said to fight skirmishes with Dongzhuo's troops every day. With Yuan Shu's help, Liu Bei hoped to put the matter of the court's corruption to bed once and for all. But the more immediate threat of the rebels Wang Lang, Zhang Chao, Zerong, and even Liu Yao could not be ignored. He took his army to Pengcheng, fuming all the way. There, Wang Lang happily deployed against him, and one of his generals challenged for combat. Liu Bei charged out in a mad rage, desperate to find a way to show the world his noble intentions. He fell from his horse at the first bout, but stood at once, shouting, "For the Han!" As the two armies made contact and arrows flew about the battlefield, another man gave the same cry. It was Wang Lang himself, facing down Zhang Fei. "The Han doesn't need another greedy coward like you, rebel," Zhang Fei said. With a single swipe of his serpent spear, Wang Lang's sword was bent and his footing lost. Wang panicked and scurried away, chased only by Zhang Fei's baying laughter. Wang's followers were unnerved and shuffled away also, but Zhang Fei and Guan Yu led the Liu horsemen in pursuit, scattering the Pengcheng army to the hills. Liu Bei, covered in sweat, was secretly relieved when his opponent fled also. He joined his brothers in the pursuit, and was able to catch up to Wang Lang and lead him back to camp with a large portion of his soldiers. There, Liu Bei told him, "The decree calling for the death of the warlords was issued by a warlord, Dongzhuo. Don't you see that I am defying his false edicts in order to collect together loyal men and deliver them to the emperor upon his rescue? You have a loyal heart, but you were misled. Please return to Pengcheng and convince your fellows to join our enterprise. This will redeem your error and return you to a filial path." While Wang Lang and company seemed to agree to this request, when Liu Bei reached Pengcheng himself a few days later, the high officials of the county were found dead around a poisoned banquet spread. When the servants claimed it had been Wang Lang's own doing, Liu Bei was furious. "I told you he was a coward," Zhang Fei commented. "He must have realized there was nothing he could do to escape his treachery," Guan Yu reasoned. "But what will the people say when they hear of this?" Liu Bei asked. "When you appoint good men, and they remember what it was like before the eunuchs interfered with the empire, they will wake from the nightmare and thank you as if you were their own father," Guan Yu said. Zhao Yun arrived also, and once the hall was cleared and reset, he was treated as Liu Bei's guest of honor. The brothers were amazed by his recounting of Chen Ji's rebellion and defeat. Good news arrived also. The city of Lujiang had declared support for Liu Bei's cause. With so much doubt about whether Liu Bei's message was making it to the people, to have such clear confirmation was like finally walking beneath the blue sky after a bout of illness. "Everyone in the land has given you their excuses for betraying you and tried to hold you back," Zhao Yun said to Liu Bei. "Yet here we are, feasting together in victory again. Who understands the true path to unification but you, Lord Liu Bei? The people are on your side. Please think nothing of the lies spat from bitter mouths." This new streak of clarity made the defiance of the lords of Guanling seem far more egregious. If even children in the street knew that Liu Bei was the only man fit to save the emperor, what excuse did scholars and generals have? Zhao Yun was dispatched to Guanling to seek their grovelling apologies, while Liu Bei originally planned to exact his revenge on Huang Shao. However, almost as soon as he set out, news arrived that Cao Cao had raised another army and was marching on Chen Commandery. The move made the cut between Liu's virtue and Cao's villainy all the clearer, and Liu Bei wasted no time marching west to deal with the reckless bandit. Now freely applying his self-made mandate to rule, he summoned provisions and men from counties all around, and they appeared in a timely fashion at the behest of the new administrators Liu had left in his wake, eager to prove themselves with a bountiful levy. This new campaign began well. Zhao Yun found that Jiang Chao had already fled the capital of Guanling when he arrived, confirming Zhao's rhetoric on the mettle of these rebellious pedants. Liu Bei, though, had received news of invasions on two fronts. Cao Cao had already mobilized his army and was set to sweep through Chen before Liu Bei arrived. Even worse, the peasant army in the north was creeping forwards and reached the state-run ironworks in Dong Commandery. "This is where the warlord Liu is taking his iron from the earth, giving back only blood in return," the rebel leader Tibao Ying said. She was a priestess of the Way of Peace and an experienced doctor, who through a mix of both valour and a heroic visage had gathered a huge army of farmers and craftsmen. "Think of what we could do with tools like theirs. Our fields will be as soft as clouds, our homes as strong as mountains. The Empire must return what it has taken, destroy their fortifications, and bring me the head of any who defend the warlords." With a sense of righteousness that forestalled any of irony, Tibao Ying sent thousands of warriors to storm the ironworks. Inside, the captain of the guard was making his final preparations. He had gathered a large retinue of refugee nobles and military officers who had fled from the advancing rebel army. Now they were formed up with spears, suits of armour and decorated horses, ready to carry out their responsibility. "Remember, these aren't ordinary soldiers," the captain said. "They've no notion of duty, propriety, or even the basics of the military texts. As such, their heads are worth more to your family shrines than any others. Prove yourselves, and I shall see that Governor Liu receives the highest praises in your name and recommendation for high office. Now, let's restore peace to the Vale and beyond. Scatter them!" These officials and their squires amounted to some 100 horsemen, who charged out to meet the Yellow Turbans. While the Turbans numbered some 3,000 at least, it was not such a reckless assault. Amid the worst of the rebellion, Liu Bei had routed an army of 50,000 with only 500 volunteered troops, so the rumour went. Perhaps there was something more to it, for the Turbans did not flee at the sight of the charge, and simply dodged this way and that to avoid them. Then many of them carried on to attack the ironworks undeterred. "Kill the rebels! Win glory!" the captain called out. "Kill the thieves! Win freedom!" Tibao Ying called out. The two sides clashed furiously, and the lines of battle were muddied and shattered beyond comprehension. At the ironworks, Imperial troops blocked the way with a line of heavy shields, but they were severely outnumbered and began to topple when mobs pushed against them with roars that reached the heavens. In the woods outside, the captain and his horsemen were battling away against the rebel centre and rearguard. The Turbans were outmatched man to man, but by starting fires among the trees, the Imperial horses were unnerved and their riders began to flounder. Gradually they were surrounded by Turban warriors and were forced to fight for their lives. The Yellow Turbans had little in the way of military training, and struggled to best Liu Bei's soldiers face to face. However, the soldiers could not avoid being surrounded and had no chances to rest during the fighting. With these counterbalancing weaknesses, both sides saw enormous loss of life without a clear result emerging. The soldiers knew what would be done to them if they fled, and remembered how their duty to slay the rebels was far above any other use their masters had for them. The rebels had all lost loved ones to the famines and plagues of the heartless Han Dominion, and could not possibly shirk from death when a chance for justice was nigh. As such, with separate but equal righteousness, both sides killed each other without halt. Some of the noble horsemen, who did not have the same dedication to their own masters as the local levies, made their escape. The surviving Yellow Turbans put everything into the attack, and finally the ironworks was overwhelmed. Its defenders were denied surrender, and were all put to death, their dismembered bodies burned in sacrifice on makeshift altars to the fallen. "Better to die with spear in hand than to waste away in the shadow of the corrupt Han," Tibao Ying told her grieving followers. Thinking of the lives they had escaped to become rebels, many gave long sighs and took solace in such contemplation. That is how the Yellow Turban army came to be not only in control of Liu Bei's ironworks, but of the main road from Dong Commandery to Langye. Furthermore, there was word that an army from Guanling under Zerong was moving up the coast in Donghai Commandery, chasing Liu's officials from the towns and executing Liu's soldiers. It would have been worse had Zhao Yun not scoured Guanling for the other separatist leader Jiang Chao and forced his surrender after a brief clash. In Langye, the city was awash with rumour and fear as news of the Yellow Turban victory arrived. All knew that Yellow Turbans had a history of particularly cruel behaviour in the cities, but the law clearly forbade them from fleeing without the local administrator's permission. That was Mi Ju in this case, and he was dismissing the idea of withdrawing out of hand. Lord Liu Bei entrusted us with this city, the people entrust us to restore order, and you would invoke the chaos of evacuation? Even if we lived, we would owe our lives as forfeit for such lunacy, Mi Ju lectured his staff. He looked to his left, where the city's military officers were arrayed. Who will volunteer to destroy the rebels on the road? After a period of silence, Mi Ju stood and pointed at the kneeling men. So you will all ignore your oaths and do nothing? Perhaps you are all in league with the rebels. Please, Master Mi, you are acting like a bird making a nest in a lumberyard, a voice said. Everyone looked to see Xiahou Dun entering the hall, dressed in civilian clothing, his face crossed by a large black eye patch. What? Aren't you that hostage, Xiahou Dun? What makes you think you can enter here and speak so freely? Mi Ju said. You spoke of ignored oaths. I made an oath to end the chaos that plagues the land long ago. How could I just sit in a guest house and rot while rogues have their way with the lands outside? Furthermore, I heard your lambasting of your own men as rebels themselves. What better way to make rebels of them is there than that? They cower only because military men are wont to serve heroic leaders. Even a common herdsman fights like a tiger at the command of Cao Cao or Liu Bei. If none will stand for you, how could you claim that it is they who are deficient of zeal? Mi Ju was speechless at such impudent words. He was about to signal for guards to come take Xiahou Dun away, but suddenly the military and civilian officials alike scrambled forwards and gathered at Xiahou Dun's feet, with their heads against the ground. Please, General, save us from those villainous rebels. We'll follow your every command, they said. Mi Ju lacked for other options, and was forced to grant Xiahou Dun weapons and armour from the city armoury, as well as a colourful seal of command. The general put out a call to arms, and true to his own claims, folk from high and low across the city rushed to the training grounds. In this fashion, the three threats to Liu Bei's caretakership were countered by three armies. Zhao Yun would seek Zerong in the east, Xiahou Dun would repel the Yellow Turbans in the north, and Liu Bei and his brothers would challenge Cao Cao in the west. Without victory in all three theatres, Liu's delicate claim and cause would be smashed. What would the result of these clashes be? Read on.